I'm very excited to have with me Max Elbaum, who is going to talk about basically what this moment means. As he always does, what this moment means for our fight for freedom here in the United States and abroad, our fight against, let's be real, like the war machine, our fight for like some kind of just economy, but really some kind of just foreign policy is really what he focuses on and has written about. And what he has written about just recently in a piece titled Palestine Solidarity and the Fight Against MAGA. He is a friend, he's a mentor, and he always is there to sort of help ground, what we're seeing in the daily horror in the broader fight, in the medium and long term fight. So super happy to have you here and him here. You're in luck. If you're listening again as in the future, that means you're a patron. Thanks so much. Patreon.com/Bitchuation room, guys. Get access to all the bonuses, all the fun stuff. A little bit later, I'm going to get into a clip I didn't play on Tuesday, the cringiest, I guess, SNL of Israel sketch. Plus, if we have time, some two other ridiculous things. Joe Manchin isn't running for re-election. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I mean, he's going to be replaced by a Republican, likely. But get out of the way. Get out of the way. Just go. Stop it. At least we can like properly hate you. I mean, or a Republican, properly hate the Republican. So fascinating, interesting stuff. We'll talk about it probably next Tuesday. But guys, again, support this show. Ad-free, completely ad-free. So many perks, so many reasons to become a member on YouTube. So many reasons really to become a patron. I guess that I get the best cut. I don't know what accent I'm attempting there, but I get a really good cut on Patreon, right, mate? So anyway, no more accents for the time being because he has limited time here, but let me just welcome him. He is a author, specifically A Revolution in the Air, 60s Radicals Turned to Lenin, Che, and Mao, which is a history of the 70s and 80s New Communist Movement. He's a co-editor with Linda Burnham and Maria Poblet of Power Concedes Nothing, How Grassroots Organizing Wins Elections. Please welcome Max Elbaum.
Hey, Francesca.
Hi, Max. I know you have limited time and I've squandered some of it. So I'm really happy to have you here. We've been meaning to catch up as friends, but then we always sort of in our friend catch up, we pivot to the world at large, which is arguably less of a fun update and discussion, although very important.
Yeah, this moment is not a fun moment. But that's what friends are for, to talk to each other when there are hard times, not only when there are good times.
I've been thinking a lot about you, yes, and I'm so happy that you wrote this article. It's in the description in YouTube for those of you who haven't read it. Convergencemag.com, and where you talk about what I think feels like two, at this point, disparate fights for us in our minds, because right now those of us who are calling for a ceasefire and ultimate end to occupation see a lot of these Democrats as perhaps the biggest roadblock to having more solidarity and treating Palestinians as human beings, right? With the Democrats who voted to censure Rashida Tlaib, to the Democrats like Joe Biden who are preventing not preventing, just aiding and abetting this onslaught and the murder of civilians in Gaza. So you have found a way to say both of those, the fight against the right can still continue while we work for Palestine solidarity. And I like, you don't have to, maybe you want to explain how you see that's possible with such an inept and complicit Democratic Party right now.
Well, Gaza being front and center in everybody's mind today, in the headlines and the carnage that's going on there right now, that hit the anti-MAGA front on its most vulnerable and divided point, its most fraught point. Even before October 7th, the biggest contention within the anti-MAGA front between the mainstream Democrats and the progressives was about foreign policy and militarism. The Biden administration, partly for its own reasons and partly under pressure from Bernie and the progressive movement, did a lot of things on domestic policy that exceeded what progressives expected. But on foreign policy, it's been same old, empire building. I mean, there are tactical differences within the ruling elite, but there wasn't anything positive much to be said about Biden's foreign policy. So we were already tussling with Biden about the hawkishness, Cold Warism toward China, all of that. Didn't supposed to renew the Iran agreement, but went back on that. So we were already fighting there. And Israel-Palestine is the most fraught part of the foreign policy thing in American politics. That's not true globally necessarily, but it's true within American politics because of the longstanding influence of Zionism in U.S. politics, the identification of one settler colonial state with another, and the power of the Christian Zionist movement, which wants all the Jews to be regathered in historic Palestine and Israel as the prelude to the rapture, in which everyone who isn't saved by Jesus Christ will go to hell. So that creates a conundrum for those of us who are for social justice and who see the Palestinian struggle as an integral part of the global struggle for racial justice and against empire. So this makes our fight against harder. It makes our fight against MAGA more difficult because the front gets more and more divided. And what happened, and this is completely understandable, it's the most progressive elements of our base that are alienated now from fighting MAGA because of what you said, because of the role of the Biden administration in aiding and abetting what amounts to a genocidal level attack on Gaza.
So effectively what you're saying is right, alienating those who otherwise, especially in 2020, came out and actually helped Biden get elected. Young people, people of color, people who feel demobilized by his actions. And so that rift debilitates us in a broader fight against fascism. But keep going. Yeah.
Right. Biden, basically, he's alienated some of the most energetic parts of his coalition, not the most powerful parts, not the richest parts, but a lot of the parts that went out there and knocked on doors during the pandemic and mobilized voters who often didn't vote. Reach the disaffected voters that the mainstream Democrats as well as the Republicans have ignored. So you have the Arab and Muslim communities, and like you said, young Black and brown voters, young voters generally, including many young Jews, are saying, I'm not voting for somebody who's committing genocide in Palestine. So what's our task? What's our task if we still think that Trump and the Republicans are an existential threat to the planet because of their climate change denialism, to civil rights and democracy in the United States, the recent stories about Trump's plan to weaponize the Justice Department if he becomes president, and all kinds of other things.
Reproductive rights. I mean, I've been thinking, this sort of hand-wringing between Republicans about, federal ban or not. Trump, if reelected, would definitely enact one. But yeah.
And they're openly genocidal about Palestine, too. I mean, you had the guy, the Republican congressman, standing up in Congress and saying, there's no Palestinian civilians. They're all Nazis. Lindsey Graham saying, level the place. So we face a stiff challenge. We don't have any choice. We have to re-engage those voters, and that means shifting opinion in the Democratic Party. And that means winning a much bigger percentage of the Democratic Party toward support for a ceasefire and toward steps toward equality in Israel-Palestine. And it probably means getting Biden out of the way, because it's not simply a question of the policy. Biden has made himself the symbol of this policy. He goes and hugs Netanyahu. I mean, in the current balance of forces, any president of the United States was going to tilt toward Israel. I mean, that was a given, but he did it with such relish. And so we have no choice but to do that. And the article I wrote talks about methods of how we can approach that. And one thing that the article does is it looks back at our experience, the experience of us old people back in the 60s, with Lyndon Johnson, who in 1968 was, he was a sitting president. He had won a landslide victory in 1964 over right-winger Barry Goldwater, and he had actually come through and played an important role in two of the most important pieces of legislation that had ever happened in U.S. history, which was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And yet he was prosecuting the Vietnam War, and we were all opposed to that.
Yeah.
So what happened was an obscure congressman named Eller Lowenstein went looking for a candidate to challenge Biden in the primaries and turn some of the anti-war sentiment that was bubbling up in all the anti-Vietnam War demonstrations into the electoral field.
LBJ, but yes, you said Biden, but yes, this is the same thing.
Turned him down. Eugene McCarthy finally did it. He went in, he did well in the first primary, and the combination of that and all kinds of other things emboldened Robert Kennedy to enter, who was a much more powerful candidate, much more attractive, much better chance to win, gets into the race, and Lyndon Johnson stepped down on March 31st, 1968. I wrote my article. March 31st, 1968, 4 days before Martin Luther King was assassinated. I remember those 2 days more vividly than I remember last week.
Tell me about that. Yeah, what was when after Lyndon Johnson steps down, MLK Jr. is assassinated, did those things correlate in your mind? Were you like, thank God LBJ is not running again and we can start new because the fascist forces are very, very real? Or was there a fear, like this guy who signed the Civil Rights Act, maybe he was the best candidate to run again?
No, everybody who was against the war, Johnson did two things. In the night that he withdrew from the presidential race, he opened up peace talks with the Vietnamese. So we all saw it as a big step toward ending the war. I mean, we were naive. It wasn't going to end the next day. Right. And it went on for 5 more years, and more people were killed after 1968 than before. So there was no perfection in this or liberation, but it was a big step forward that Johnson was forced from office. And then, of course, if Robert Kennedy, he was assassinated, things did not go well after that. And no one knows for sure what Robert Kennedy would have done if he had been elected instead of Richard Nixon. But the point is that a primary challenge to a sitting president that looked like a complete non-starter opened up new possibilities. In the mainstream. It widened the split in the ruling class, and it energized a lot of people in the progressive movement. And we need something like that today. We need to
I wanted to stop you. Yeah. I'm really, because I know you have limited time, but let's get down to brass tacks, because I'm surprised to hear you say this. I didn't think I would hear you say this, because I think that your general and everyone's general calculation is we have to defeat the right and we have to throw down and hold our nose and whatnot. And this doesn't mean, but you're doing a little bit of 7D chess here, a little like thinking ahead. And others have also said, yeah, if we can push Biden to resign or someone else throws their hat in the ring. Obviously, you've got Cornel West, you've got the other Kennedy, who is actually polling better, RFK Jr. polling better than Biden in some places. But I guess on a practical level, do you think this is a little bit of a fool's errand, or are you just saying, no, look, it has happened before, and we should try and we should try and do it again, or someone should? Do you feel like maybe you're being unrealistic? Or should we just resign ourselves?
Well, two things. First of all, the attitude of progressives in the front is unity and struggle. We contend with our partners in the anti-MAGA front over issues, and we unite with them when necessary. That was Bernie's approach in 2016 and 2020. He ran against, he challenged Hillary. He was running against Biden in the primaries in 2020. Didn't mean he pulled his punches on his issues. He criticized the opponents. There was a time to emphasize the struggle side and the time to emphasize the unity side.
Right.
And this is a time around Palestine to emphasize the struggle side. Now, you have to struggle in a way that you don't burn every bridge. Right. You don't, one of the things in politics is that people who are your enemies at one stage might be your allies at another stage. And you have to learn how to fight without cutting off your own options and learning how to fight and fight hard, but not do it in a way that every bridge is burned.
Right.
As far as the current situation, look, the balance of forces isn't as favorable to us as it was in the 1960s around Vietnam. It's not as favorable to us. There's not someone who is as relatively progressive as Robert Kennedy was in 1968, even though he had been a terrible, terrible person in the early 60s, and he played a terrible role earlier in his career in many respects. But he moved because of social pressure and what was happening. We're not at that point right now. We don't have that kind of thing. We're unlikely to have, if Bernie couldn't win in 2016 and 2020, a candidate that's advocating for Palestinian rights is probably not going to win the Democratic Party nomination in 2024. But there have been discussions going on in the Democratic elite for months about Biden and whether he should stay in office. Is he a weak candidate and so on? It's very important. David Axelrod, who was Obama's shrewdest strategist, tweeted a day or two ago, or maybe it was 4 days ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, yeah.
Biden should consider stepping down. Now, David Axelrod is not a pundit. He's not a columnist for the New York Times. He's a strategic insider who has Obama's ear and is very well placed in the Democratic elite. People like that don't tweet that kind of thing unless it's being discussed in the Democratic elite. He was falling in the polling numbers, all that kind of stuff, even before Gaza.
He was, yeah.
And the Democratic strategists, for all their shortcomings and problems, most of them know how to count. I was at a program.
Most of them, except for the Nates, the Silvers, and the other one that got it wrong.
You look at the key swing states. Michigan. Michigan has a large number of Arab and Muslim voters who are totally alienated now from Biden. Virginia has that population. Georgia has a population. These are key states in 2024. Yeah. So if the Democratic High Command is at least discussing whether someone can talk to Biden about stepping aside, without there yet being a serious primary challenge to Biden within the Democratic Party. So if we can create such a challenge, it doesn't have to be somebody who we think is going to win. We had pry open the door. Yeah. We can pry open the door. We also, if we energize people behind such a candidacy, it helps, aside from the presidential race, it helps for the long-range building of the progressive movement. It helps for the defense of the 22 Congress people and one senator who've come out for a ceasefire, because those people need to be supported. Every single one of them that's up for re-election is going to be attacked by AIPAC. The defense industry, like you said, the whole military industrial complex is going to come down on them like a ton of bricks, and they have to be defended. And they're much better defended if there's a coherent block of people who move with a national campaign.
Of course.
And then who knows? I don't at all think it's unrealistic that that kind of pressure can make Biden drop out. And then, of course, there's going to be a whole bunch of other crappy Democrats who flow in and want to be president. Pritzker,
Sure.
the governor of Illinois, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, Gavin Newsom in California, and who knows who else, you know?
Right, but what you're saying is basically, I mean, there's two questions, right? One is like a movement candidate, which I think it sounds like you're saying even if they are a movement candidate, at least they could, and I guess I'm trying to clarify this, they could push the conversation so that Biden feels some amount of pressure to step down. But I would respond by saying, I don't think he is moved by movement people. He's not moved by people. Look at 66% of Americans who don't want to, who want diplomacy and want a ceasefire, right? That he ignores outright. And so I guess my question, I have two questions, which is, could it be Cornel West and RFK Jr. are running as independents at this point, but could it be someone with it, you know, a movement person, whatnot? Or does it have to be like a grand recruitment of a Newsom that like Axelrod does that happens above our heads, that like Newsom's not going to come out with a line that's to the left of Biden really on Gaza. However, he won't have the war stuck to him. Any new candidate won't have the war as part of their legacy, which whether or not Arab American and Muslim American voters will vote for that person because their policies might not be radically different, at least they won't have the blood of however many tens of thousands of civilians on their hands. So I guess I wanted some clarity on that from you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. What I do know is if we do nothing, we are in deep, deep trouble. If we just let this go by and keep doing what we've been doing and more or less say, okay, we're stuck with Biden, we're going to vote for him, I think the odds on winning in 2024 go down substantially. Now, lots of things can happen. Trump can get convicted on 2 or 3 things. Trump can have a meltdown right in front of it. I mean, he's barely coherent right now.
Right. He shits himself live on television. The diaper explodes. We've been through it. Yeah.
All kinds of things can happen. But right now, you have to say the odds are that Biden is a weak candidate. And if we can get a different candidate in there, it's better. Now, can we get someone more flexible on Israel-Palestine? I don't completely rule that out either. If you've been reading Thomas Friedman's columns, okay, Thomas Friedman, we don't like Thomas Friedman. He's the mouthpiece of the ruling class, but he's been writing columns that say Israel's making a big mistake. You have to give the Palestinians hope, blah, da, 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 da. It's all phrased as what's good for Israel and good for the United States.
Sure.
But the point is, it reflects that there is a division within the ruling class, and there are some of them who realize that it's not in the interest of the United States to be so closely tied to this lunatic government in Israel.
Yeah.
So there is room for some flexibility there. Not so much for Biden, because he's like you said, he's hung that around his neck. So I do think that there are prospects to widen that crack. The polling results, majority of people and a very substantial majority of Democrats are for a ceasefire. Sympathy tilted in the last 3 years toward Palestine more than toward Israel among the Democratic base. Obviously, the particular ways, the brutality of Hamas's attack and so on, that's shifted that in one direction. But the Israelis are more than making up. If you're talking about brutal killing, they seem to be, they want to beat Hamas at that game. The second thing, what you said, Francesca, I think there's a more complicated psychology of someone like Biden. Why did Lyndon Johnson step down? These folks, they have a sense of, they're makers of history. They think about their legacy. They think about their legacy for their class. And that's the way they think about it. Biden, if he steps down tomorrow, he can say, I'm the one who beat Trump in 2020. I shifted the ground in domestic politics away from the neoliberalism towards something else. And when I did something unpopular, but that was right in his mind, what he's doing was right, I stepped down for the good of the country.
Mm.
If he stays in and loses in 2024, that legacy is shot. He'll be tagged with the person who lost to Trump and ended democracy from their class point of view. I mean, we got a pretty shaky democracy here as it is, but this is not the way they think. So that,
and he's not going to win.
There's plenty of indication that Biden himself already thinks, his whole FDR thing, I'm going to be like FDR, I'm going to be transformational. So it's a very you can't get inside somebody's head. You don't know exactly what's happening. But the combination of global pressure, I mean, the headline in Time magazine the other day was, the West has lost the global South over Israel. The whole global South is, and there are wings of the U.S. ruling class that know this. So, what if Obama calls up Biden and says, look, Joe, we've been friends. I appointed you vice president. That's why you're president now.
It's always the call from Obama.
You got to get out.
You gotta go. You gotta go, buddy. I mean, it is amazing that Obama had to put out a statement that, after when you sift through all I think the president's amazing and great is really like, there's actually a lot of difference there. Like, you can't cut off water and electricity to a population and food aid and whatnot. You wrote a lot about Obama's daylight, as you put it, at the time that he put between Netanyahu then and his administration, obviously the Iran deal. I think this is really an important conversation, and it's fascinating. And I think I guess the one thing I wanted to say before I let you go, and I'll give you a chance, but is I think we see that pressure is working, right? I think we know unlike in the year 2003 when we went to war in Iraq, obviously had already invaded Afghanistan, there was a massive consensus among the elite class about war. And now and the way it was going, and you don't see that consensus now, even obviously in, you've got the squad members as we mentioned, who are calling for ceasefire. You've got there are celebrities speaking out. It wasn't Michael Moore getting booed on the stage at the Oscars. I mean, there is a sense that this is not an open and shut, like everyone's on board with this war. And there's a sense that day by day by day, every single protest that people are attending, every single call they are making, as futile as it might feel, is absolutely not, that it is mounting pressure. So I did just want to say, like, as a place to feel like, where can I start tomorrow? I feel like we are already doing the work today, and we need more and more of that work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The protests on this issue are unprecedented in size. The rebellion at the State Department, the rebellion among the Democratic National Committee staff, artists, writers, celebrities.
Inside the State Department.
The State Department. So people are making a difference on the most immediate thing for, a ceasefire and humanitarian aid to Gaza. That's number one right now. But I guess, I'm totally open if someone's got a better idea. This is like, the reason I wrote this article is to stir the pot.
Yeah.
We can't be in the mindset that we're just spectators. We have a role to play, and that role to play in part in fighting MAGA is, when push comes to shove, yes, I think we're going to have to go out there and do our best to motivate alienated voters that are ignored, and try to win the 2024 elections. For the reasons I said about the danger of the Republican Party, which, we could spend hours talking about. They have a whole plan. They're shameless about it. It's right out there in writing from the Heritage Foundation and now from their lawyers. But we also are players in terms of pressure. We shouldn't forget that from 2016 and 2020. Yeah. We are not just, we're helpless, we can't do anything. There may be other ways to energize people. Certainly supporting the people who are for a ceasefire in the squad. That's going to energize people. And, we are players in that. And there'll be big fights over every single person who supported the ceasefire. So we have to try to grab the moment and think big, think ambitious.
And there is a year. I mean, we are a year out. It's not like this is a couple months away.
So, we just, get out there. There's some quote from Julius Caesar. There's a flood in the affairs of gender of men that if taken it to flood, they, and I don't remember exactly what it is. It basically says, if you seize the moment when you have an opportunity, you can make a big difference. And if you miss it, you miss it. It doesn't come around all the time. There's lots of people looking for an alternative. Most people have figured out that a third party or abstentionist thing is not going to work in the current structure of U.S. politics. And we somehow have to get the kind of coalition together that's durable enough to be and broad enough to beat MAGA. And what this has made clear is that without a wing that's in support of Palestine and a broad sympathy minimally an end to killing Palestinians, we're not going to do it. Those things have to be intertwined. There's a moral and a political imperative.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.